really powerful stuff, I think, for police organizations to understand. We don't have to tear everything down. And if we focus on the most important job, the most important position is the chief of police, and we get that hire right, everything else takes care of itself. It really does. Organizational culture, I think if we change that, matter of fact, I know we change that, we're going to see cops come back. We're absolutely going to see cops come back. We're not going to have good people left to do this job, as hard as it is, when we now create cultures where we don't even value them or we don't appreciate them. Hopefully a lot of leaders that read this book and say, you know what, I need to get into therapy. I need to talk to somebody. I need to get a coach. I need to freaking figure out who I am. I just hope that happens, because you'd be welcome to join the club, because we're all in this thing together.
Welcome to Responder Resilience, along with my co-host Bonnie Rumley, LCSW EMT. I'm David Dashinger. In this episode, we'll be speaking with motivational speaker and author Chad Michael Bruckner about his new book, The Holy Trinity of Successful and Healthy Police Organizations, Improving Leadership, Culture, and Wellness. We're going to dive deep into organizational leadership, culture, and wellness and Chad's book.
This episode is made possible by Cover, an all-natural military-grade mineral sunscreen lotion. Providing broad-spectrum protection in an SPF 30, Cover blocks 97% of harmful UVA and UVB rays, but is light enough to allow your skin to breathe. First responders often spend long hours in the sun, and prolonged skin exposure is one of the hazards of the job. First responders love Cover because it won't stain clothing, and the 4-ounce bottle fits easily into a backpack or go bag. Go to kovr.respondertv.com to get 15% off all Cover sunscreen products. That's kovr.respondertv.com.
We invite you to like and subscribe. Our YouTube channel is Responder Resilience, or on Facebook, Responder Wellness Inc. and Responder TV, bbsradio.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and go to our website, respondertv.com, for past episodes and guest information. We'll be right back to speak with Chad after this.
In this family, more of us die by our own hands than by the hazards of the job. In this family, up to a quarter of 911 dispatchers have symptoms of PTSD. In this family, our mental health and wellness are in crisis, while responders are quietly suffering. In this family, many struggle with job-related stress, burnout, trauma, sleep disruption, substance abuse, and marriage problems. In this family, we can help the helpers with vital information and resources, resilient strategies, and success stories of overcoming the obstacles. In this family, no one is alone. Welcome to Responder Resilience with co-hosts retired Lieutenant David Dashinger, Dr. Stacy Raymond, and Bonnie Rumley, LCSW EMTB.
Today, we're joined by Chad Bruckner. He's an author and motivational speaker from Allentown, Pennsylvania. Chad served 13 years in law enforcement and 8 years in the U.S. Army Infantry. And Chad was promoted to sergeant at the age of 20 and led combat missions in Iraq. Chad is a passionate advocate for veterans and police officers, and his mission is to inspire and empower first responders and veterans to reach their full potential. We're excited to be speaking with Chad today about the release of his new book, The Holy Trinity of Successful and Healthy Police Organizations, Improving Leadership, Culture, and Wellness. Chad, welcome back to Responder Resilience.
Hey, David, thanks for having me. Hi, Bonnie. How are you?
Hey, it's great having you back.
Pleasure.
Feels like home.
It does. It does. You're going to have to give me a key or something, or I'll have to pay rent.
Be careful what you ask for. We may ask you to be a regular guest.
That sounds amazing. I love it.
Well, let's jump right in. We're really excited about your book. We, are happy to help you promote it in any way that we can. But I'd love for our listeners and viewers to know, what is your why and how? Why did you write the book? What led you to this path?
Yeah, that's a great question. I tried not to write the book, actually. I when I left law enforcement in early 2021, I definitely had my head low and was trying to piece together a career. It was 21 years of government service, and the last couple of that was just rough for me. And so at that point, I was running away from it for sure. But the more I ran away, the more I got that nudge back on my shoulder. The more I tried to ignore it or tune it out, the more I felt a tug on my shirt and pulling me like, hey, I'm here. Don't forget, you can't run away. You can't hide. So the more that I went down this road, the why, the more police officers I spoke to really around the country, the more I started to influence on social media and try to help and just be a positive light in people's lives, especially veterans, first responders. I started to hear the messages and the text messages and exchanging cell phone numbers. I have a 45-minute call with a stranger from California, police officer, who's venting to me about his chief and the struggles he's going through. And it just was a couple of years of these like type of events. And I'm realizing we have a major crisis in this country. Like I thought my incident was related to me, or somehow I brought it on myself, or I deserved some of that. So I was willing to own that all and kind of put my head low and run away. But certainly I think there's a much bigger issue at stake here. And that's kind of what led me to write the book is the connection I have with just so many people in this first responder community, which is such a small community. But I really feel like the more I talk to them, we have an issue that it's a leadership, culture, and wellness issue that all together, you put that together, it creates some really unhealthy places that are taking people by hostage, taking employees by hostage. And the ones that make it out healthy and retired, credit to them. But that's just not the most common thing. You know, we want to say that, I'm going to save it for retirement and make it there. But often we don't talk about what does that look like when we get to retirement and we're divorced, or we're on our second marriage, or we spend our money, or we have a substance abuse issue. We don't want to acknowledge that those things are real. They are coming from many of us in these professions. So that's my why. It's I want to help. I want to help make change, create some real conversation, real dialogue. Of course, it's going to be hard and it's going to be uncomfortable for some that are, current positions, these stakeholder positions. And that's not my job to alienate, but I think we have to have hard conversations, and we have to start looking at ourselves and asking the questions, did we do this? Are we culpable? What responsibility do we have to fix this mess? We have to start saying we and I. And so as much as I try to run away from it, Bonnie, it kept pulling me back.
I know what you mean. I have a similar relationship with EMS. But it's also beautiful, right? Because when that happens, you know that you're not meant to leave it, that you're meant to do a different layer of work for the profession that you really do love inside, which is why some of it hurts so much, right? I would venture to say.
100%. It's that pain. It's that you didn't love me like I thought I loved you. Right. So I'm done with you. And then the more time that goes by, I realize, man, I really loved you. And I think you loved me too. Right. But we got to work through this. I'm not going to just run away and have this shame, and you have this shame, and we both carry this shame for 30 years till we both die, meaning the profession and myself. So that's a weird correlation to say that I still love the job. I still love it. I think American policing is in a crisis, but I think it's so important. I think we need healthy, strong public servants in our communities. That really is important. And I think we can get that back by making some subtle changes, and it starts from us, from within. Right.
I love that, Chad, because it's so easy to sit in the wherever, in the locker room and point the finger at leadership and say, they. But when you change it around, flip the switch and call it we, and realize that we all are stakeholders, we're all responsible in some way for the state of affairs, it's a game changer. And I'd love for you to speak to that, like based on your experience and based on your conversations with people, what is the state of leadership in law enforcement today?
It's dire, David. It's dire. The more conversations I have, and the more I open up in the book talking about organizational betrayal. And I spoke at a conference in Maine in June. I met a couple therapists there, and they really opened my eyes. I was deep in the book writing process, but the conversations I had with them privately were, they're telling me, Chad, what we're seeing more than anything? More than the trauma on the street, which is bad. Obviously, seeing people die and fatal accidents, and those things are traumatic and do damage to us. But what we're treating cops more, first responders more for? Organizational betrayal. Mm-hmm. Being abandoned by the very organization that gave them their EMS equipment or their handguns and handcuffs. And we give you this really hard job. And then for many of these cops, they feel like they're betrayed by that very organization or the profession that they loved, and they're changing for. They're sacrificing themselves for, and the community they're changing for them. So that organizational betrayal, which then I experienced, is a real gut shot. It's a real gut shot. I've never been cheated on personally in any sort of relationships. So my wife and I share this story because she had a boyfriend of 7.5 years from all through high school through college, thought she was going to get married. They break up, and then they find out. She finds out he has, for the last 2.5 years of the relationship, he has with another woman. He lived with her part time. So, I for the last 15 years married to my wife, I hear these stories and I'm able to relate. But now I really have some experience to understand what that organizational betrayal is when you literally are willing to die for the job that you do happily and gladly, proudly, boldly, fiercely. selflessly. All these absolute run into 100 miles an hour to a burning building. I'm happy to do it. No problem. That's what you asked me to do, and I'm happy to do it. But you can't betray me. You can't abandon me when things go bad. You can't. You just can't do it. We're not going to have good people left to do this job, as hard as it is, when we now create cultures where we don't even value them, or we don't appreciate them, or create places for them to heal when they fall down. That's the other thing. What we don't do is we expect them to not fall, and then when they do, we want to cast them to the side. My argument in this book is, what if we make some changes internally to let people heal right where they're at? They don't have to leave. There's no judgment, no stigma, no bias. They heal and they come right back. And I think we can do it. Absolutely can do it.
One of our colleagues committed suicide, and I was the first one on the scene and walking through the door of the hotel room.
Was a motor vehicle accident, people trapped, people on fire, human running down the street on fire.
I witnessed a patient who was assaulted with a baseball bat. And I remember opening the front door and hearing a police officer screaming, "It's bad."
I would agree with you. Stacey and I see a lot of that institutional abandonment and institutional betrayal in our practices. I mean, I would say it's right up there with the traumatic images. And sometimes worse. Sometimes it's worse. It's not just, I did that bad call, but then no one checked on me. And I got into a deep, dark hole for weeks. It's sad the amount that we hear that.
You know what? And it's funny. I experienced that, and that was one of the things I had to work through. So I'm glad you brought this up, because you hear from a lot of cops, they retire. Oh, I'm never going to talk to anybody again, or nobody talks to me. And you hear a lot of leaders say that. Oh, the chief, everybody loved me when I was chief, and then I leave, and nobody talks to me anymore. Well, did they love you then? I don't know. That's a question for you. But we don't talk about when we sever these careers from us and we lose our identity through that. We have to have other things that we fall back on. And in this profession, when we take hostages and we sever our relationships, then when the profession leaves us on top of that, we have nothing. And then we start to attach ourselves. Oh, people didn't reach out to me. And we go down that hole and get depressed and have further issues. And I really think a lot of that just comes from personal shame. It's I don't know how to react to you through your pain because I have my own pain that I'm not able to deal with. So how could I possibly reach out and support you and encourage? It's like the air mask on a plane. I'm struggling from air, brother. So like, if you expect me to reach out to you and check on your pain, sorry, and these are subconscious thoughts that we have. These aren't internal conversations that we're saying. And I think so. A lot of first responders, when we have that resentment towards each other, that's a little bit to the two that I want to help them understand is, instead of judging them or being mad at them or being resentful to them for not reaching out to you, maybe they're going through the exact same thing you're going through. And if one of you can just brave a little bit of courage, a little bit of pride, and just reach out to the other, maybe that connection can save your lives and change your lives. Maybe you'll start to have some commonality, start to have some activities, start to get into post-retirement, literally from one text or phone call. If I'm going to put my pride aside and reach out to this person. It can really change it.
Well, yeah. And Chad, let's widen out a little bit, because your book has a very interesting format. It's got an arc, really, of I'd like you to speak to it. Like, how did you organize the book? How is it laid out in terms of chapters, and what's the overall approach that you had to writing it? Yeah, this is awesome. I love this part. I'm just, as a creative person in general, that was some of my struggles with this project, is wanting to. I had the content, so to speak, and I had the plan how to write the book, but I didn't feel creatively in a way that I just could put a story out there that was in line with my values, because I know I'm an odd duck sometimes. So the more I wrote things down, the more I prayed to God, the more I reflected on things. I really realized, and a lot of musical influence in my life, that I wanted to tell a story that started you somewhere and ended you somewhere, not just a chapter
which is what the suggestions people give. I'll write a chapter that people don't read whole books anymore, write individual standalone chapters, which I think is fantastic. And I agree with that. But I think that was fighting against my ethos of what I wanted. And so I wanted to tell a story. I wanted to leave the audience, the reader, not feeling so overwhelmed with the challenge ahead of them, if that's what they're feeling, and have that positive finish to it. So I felt the chapters and the seasons, which are important for me in my life. I was born in the winter, so we start there, and it's kind of drab and dark, and we finish with summer, which is my favorite season, and it's light and it's airy, and you're out in the sunshine, and so that's who I am, and I kind of wanted to communicate that and show that to people that's just kind of how my brain processed all that. I wanted to put quotes at the beginning of each chapter that communicated that had some idea related to the content they're about to read, just to kind of an icebreaker to grab their attention. And these are all quotes that I saved in my phone for 15 years over the years, and I heard them. So it was kind of cool to be able to go and put a lot of that stuff that I have been collecting over the years of things that inspired me and moved me. And then my journal on top of that, being able to share, which was the hardest part for me, was put some of my journal entries from the last couple of years in there at the end. And that was the one thing that almost didn't get in there, but I didn't want to put it in there. But the flip side of that was I didn't want to be disingenuous or tell you to be vulnerable, and I'm not being vulnerable myself. So that was the one where, because when you write a journal, it's like really personal. You're in a moment of that emotional headspace, wherever you're at. Some of them, one of them I put in the book, I think I was crying as I'm writing it, in my police car in uniform. So, and that was just me working through that stuff. So, but I wanted to share that as a way to help other cops understand that if you're a big tough guy and you're sitting in your car crying, trying to work through some stuff, it's okay. It doesn't mean that you're broke. It doesn't mean that the world's over, and it's going to be okay. I made it through, and you can make it through too.
Do you think that fear of sharing that deepest vulnerability is fear of judgment?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%. I think that fear holds us back from so much I think we become different people, Bonnie. I think we become, I became a different person serving the job, we immerse ourselves and are willing, as service-oriented people, duty-bound people, we're willing to immerse ourselves in these environments and change for others.
Right.
If I have to kind of morph into something that you need, that I think you need, and this could be totally wrong, but I think you need this, I felt duty-bound to do that for you. So just over 21 years, I started to, who am I really? Deep inside of me, who am I really? For the last 4 years or 3 years since I left, I found parts of myself that I didn't know were in there. And it's just a lesson to all first responders to really dig deep on who you are. Your vocation can be the biggest passion in the world, like it was for me as an undercover detective. But man, it's not who you are, and it's not what we are. It's just what we do. And and I think that's important for us to find that who we are inside.
You talk about so many important topics in the book, and I just want to pick out one right now to talk about, and that's recruitment and retention. Obviously a big challenge to the policing profession as well as the other first responder professions. So what are some of the barriers that are, making it so difficult to recruit new police officers and retain them as long-term employees?
Culture, organizational culture. I really believe at the end of the day, and I think you have researchers now, I've been reading a lot more online in the last few months, but when this is all said and done, I think we're going to learn right off the bat that organizational culture is the key to keep good people, is the key to hire good people, is the key to keep people that fall down in the game and keep them well, is the key to supporting humans. All of us are going to go through stuff in our personal life. At workplaces, we're not robots, whether we're accountants, cops, teachers, we're human beings. And I think this reset we're seeing, this recruitment retention issue, is really going to speak to the larger issues. You can't take hostages in the course of your job. You can't treat people how you want to treat people in the course of your job. It doesn't work that way. And so we're going to find organizational culture is fundamentally the number one thing. And that starts at the top, unfortunately, or fortunately. I think it's a great challenge, but some of the chiefs I've talked to in the last couple of years, it's acknowledging the thing they don't want to acknowledge, that they're responsible for the negative stuff, some of the negative stuff that goes on in their agency. I'm not saying lawmakers, policyholders aren't culpable either, because they certainly are. But at the end of the day, they're not in our teams day in and day out. They're just not. They make decisions for us. But who's with us every day, every minute we're at our job is our chief executive, our leaders. those they're with us. They're with us every day. They're pushing the narrative that whether they agree with it or not, the policy, they're setting that. They have such an ability to turn negatives into positive, reframe things, and make things collaborative and community, and not where people are infighting with each other. So it's organizational culture, David. Organizational culture. I think if we change that, matter of fact, I know we change that, we're going to see cops come back. We're absolutely going to see cops come back. And here's one of the things that it's interesting to me, what I think we're going to start seeing in the next 6 months to a year. There's a lot of good chiefs out there, and I've talked to them, but they're not public about some of their thoughts. They share with me, but they're not going to be out there public with some of the chiefs that neighbor them. Some of the things that I hear, that level of resentment from the good chiefs and the bad chiefs. So I think when you start to get the law of diffusion, you start to get the early adopters when movement starts to happen, real movement starts to change. You're going to get those great leaders out there who are sitting in place now, who are kind of in the minority. They're going to start to come out and they're going to really, I think, make the momentum exasperate even more, because they're waiting for their chances. They're waiting for someone to come in and say, hey, we got to be servant-minded, servant-oriented. We're about the community and our officers here. Those leaders are already in the profession, but they're just not allowed to win, so to speak. They're not allowed to let those talents shine according to their abilities, because a lot of these cultures just aren't set up for that to happen.
Come on. Check it. Come on, let's go. My heart went boom.
So in a lot of the conversations you have with chiefs and other officers, what do you think are some of those key components that people could do today, tomorrow to change? Because we understand there needs to be a cultural change, right? So what does that really look like and translate into?
Yeah, I think the municipalities, the police departments that are in the next 12 months, 18 months going to be hiring it. They know their chief's leaving, going to be hiring a new chief. They have an amazing opportunity to really examine this opportunity and the position they're going to hire for. I know we always say every department head, and I work for local government, I do a lot of work in local government now, so public works, code enforcement, chief of police. You hear a lot of these, they're all important positions, obviously. But do we ever actually really stop for any of those positions and evaluate what traits are we looking for in that person? We talk about their resume, and I wish they were SWAT team or wish they did this and that. But on a resume, it doesn't show you, are they empathetic? Are they an active listener? These soft skills and these emotionally intelligent, driven metrics are really, really important. As a matter of fact, I think they're more important than the other stuff that we have been hiring for 50 years. And I think that's really the issue we finally ended in this crescendo in law enforcement is we've been promoting too many executives based on how many arrests they make, how many SWAT jobs they've done, political subterfuge or their personal connections to people. And you see this on a larger context in the government, federal government, but over time and generational, if we continue to do not unmerit-based systems and practices, we're going to have systems like this that are just broken, and we're going to have good people leaving because they realize they're smart enough and aware enough to know that, and have some knowledge enough to know that the system is broken, that they could probably fix it better from the outside. So, I think that's really going to be these municipalities in the next 12 to 18 months. This is an opportunity for them to exasperate, gain their momentum for their agency because they can do it right. They can do it. It's not just another hire. For those that, and I talked to a municipal manager last week who said, Chad, I got 5 more years of this police chief. I feel like I'm babysitting this guy. He's angry all the time, yelling at me, yelling at people. What do I do? And I said, the elected officials hired this person. I mean, there's nothing you can do. If he's not creating a good culture, that's such a bad situation to be in. I don't know. Because I don't claim to have the answers on how we can redevelop those leaders, because I think that's a daily practice. If you're in a leadership role, going to the FBI National Academy, Northwestern, these are great schools. I know so many great leaders that went to these schools, and I think they should be prerequisites to become an executive. But that shouldn't be the only prerequisite. We should be looking at what they're doing every single day. What letters of recommendation are we getting from people in their department? I think that will be a great mode we could recommend. In the Army, to get promoted, you actually had to be recommended by your first line supervisor. So you couldn't just say, I want to be promoted. You could say that, but then your first line supervisor, I'm going to recommend you. Now in law enforcement and policing, would we recommend, if everybody that want to get promoted, if their first line supervisor, would they recommend them? I don't know. Then you have the personal nature of things and how that would be. So further discussions for sure. But really evaluating the chief executive position is so important. And I think, and I highlight this in the book, is I came up with a spreadsheet. It's a 10-point factor that I think stakeholders, elected officials can use when making chief selections on boards. Often a lot of the executive hiring firms are people that also have personal agendas, or they know a lot of these people in the field. Maybe it's a chief who retired, started a side business. And so getting objective, unbiased information sometimes can be tricky for people that don't have this knowledge, like, elected officials. Some of these city council people work construction by day and they're on the city council by night, or they're accountants by day and they're on the township board by night. They don't know what a chief of police really should be or should do. So they're getting a lot of their information from consultants and other stakeholders who, if they're not giving them unbiased information, that could affect their decision making. So having a matrix or having a sheet like I came up with, and it can be any site system, but having 10 blocks or 10 areas where you put in the most important factors that is important to your police department. I put in 10 sample ones that I think are the most important, like emotional intelligence, active listening, leading with empathy. These are the things that are most important, because all the other stuff takes care of itself. When conflict arises, when you have strong leaders with soft skills, they work through conflict like no other.
You touched on something also, which is the elected officials or whoever manages the municipality. They may hire this chief executive, and I've seen it in the fire world as well as other agencies, that once they get in, this executive becomes the chief in that organization. The municipality or the people that run the town don't really know the day-to-day, what's going on inside the police station or the fire station or the EMS agency. There's so much that goes on in there, which if they found out about it would probably make them scratch their head as to, why did we hire this person, or why are we keeping them as chief? Is there a way you think that we can have more transparency about the inner issues, the internal issues that are happening within our agencies that the lawmakers have no concept are even occurring?
Yeah, I think that these conversations, I think this is how we start this. I've talked to some elected officials about this, David, and it's insane that some of these conversations I had, these are good people. These are people that, they're not being thanked and celebrated for serving in their local communities. They're getting yelled at by residents, but these are people that say, hey, I want to serve and make a difference. Right. But they are not thinking of the way we're having a conversation. So I think this is really, really important. Some of the conversations I've been having with elected officials in the last couple of years has been eye-opening. It's been informational, educational to them. Like, oh, I never thought about this. Or, wow, we just always did it this way. Or they came recommended from so-and-so. Well, who was so-and-so? So-and-so is connected to so-and-so. So maybe there's a pipeline we have to just be a little skeptical or a little curious about. So I think the conversations and this dialogue is so critical, because we would have never talked like this 4 or 5 years ago. We just didn't have these conversations. Yeah. There's a lot of executives still struggling to have these conversations, and they know they need to talk about this because they're, I talked to a chief who is a young chief, not getting along well with his officers in his department. He's targeting them. Some of them think he's targeting them enough. So I'm doing some consultant work to help coach, and he's so angry at the system. He's so angry at the stakeholders, the elected officials. He's angry at the bureaucracy that he's taking it out on his guys. And I said, how do you think, if you're scared, he said, I'm scared, I don't want to lose my job. I said, how do you think they feel? You're scared. But have you ever stopped to think of the fear they may have? No different than a parent. Scared parents create anxious and scared kids. That's just the way it is. I mean, I'm not a clinician, but Bonnie, I'd imagine, say, if you're a scared parent, an anxious parent, and you're always taking that baggage out on kids, the kids are probably more likely to grow up with an anxiety disorder or some sort of depression, I'd imagine, than a parent who's emotionally in control and is willing to have a conversation and work through things. So, yeah, I think we have a lot of discussions that need to happen, and it comes from a place of unhealed trauma. I really believe childhood trauma and that unresolved stuff that happens to us when we're young, for many of us, that we don't want to acknowledge.
I was just going to say to you that, when you become a leader, so just to flip side it a little bit, as the leader of my EMS agency, there are a lot of things that no one really tells you, or you can't learn anywhere. You learn by doing, right? And I was grateful that I was a therapist, because I could see a lot of it and not take it personally, but quickly realized that everyone's childhood traumas get played out on the leader whoever it is, it's if I represent your mother figure or your father figure and you're not happy with me today, I can see it play out, right? And I think that there has to be a lot of education around that piece of things, because as a leader, how do you deal with that? Or how do you know that it's really not about you? It's about something that's gone on in this person's life, and it's coming to light now. Or you put some rules or sanctions in, to protect people, but they see it as punitive and hurtful and abusive because maybe that's what they had. So this notion of unresolved childhood traumas, they're absolutely real. And I think they play out in every single workforce. It's no different. You get a bunch of therapists together, they're going to play out their stuff together as well. So we're not unique in first responder world with that. But I think if we can build awareness, you mentioned emotional intelligence, super important. These jobs are people oriented. So the more you can understand the human psyche, trauma, psychology, then the more you can have a well-rounded viewpoint and know how to deal with some of these issues.
Imagine not taking things personally. Imagine being in a place where everything that happens around you, you don't make it about you. That's a powerful place to be in, because you can help a lot of people that way.
Right.
The flip side goes, and again, kind of piggybacking on what you said, imagine, and I agree with you, the leader has to deal with so much. Then on top of that, what if the leader has some trauma, some baggage they haven't worked through?
Right.
Their perspective and their lens, how to deal with their team, even if they want to help their team members, they might not be coming at it from the best spot because they're not the most healthy. They're not the most well. They're using their childhood experiences are now confusing, this team member who you said, hey, I'm doing this to help you. No, you're hurting me. Well, the chief's saying, well, I'm doing it to help you. Maybe, am I doing it to help you? Am I doing it to hurt you? I think it can be really confusing. And I think these conversations go a lot of way. I think there's going to be hopefully a lot of leaders that read this book and say, you know what, I need to get into therapy. I need to talk to somebody. I need to get a coach. I need to ask some questions. I need to freaking figure out who I am. I just hope that happens, because you'd be welcome to join the club, because we're all in this thing together.
This episode is made possible by Cover, an all-natural military-grade mineral sunscreen lotion. Providing broad-spectrum protection in an SPF 30, Cover blocks 97% of harmful UVA and UVB rays, but is light enough to allow your skin to breathe. First responders often spend long hours in the sun, and prolonged skin exposure is one of the hazards of the job. First responders love Cover because it won't stain clothing, and the 4-ounce bottle fits easily into a backpack or go bag. Go to kovr.respondertv.com to get 15% off all Cover sunscreen products. That's kovr.respondertv.com.
Chad, I'll just throw this out to you in terms of a general question, but what do you want people to know about this book? Like, what do you want them to take away from it that they maybe didn't know before, or something you want to highlight that people should know about the book?
Hard change doesn't have to be that hard. Hard change doesn't have to be that hard. We make things harder than it has to be. I am not, and I talk about this in the book to highlight to police officers, I'm not a bright individual. These things I suggest and recommend if you just make a consistent effort in your life, it's going to make your life much better. It's going to make the way you serve other humans better. And it's going to make the way you lead in your agency so much better. When that happens, all that joy that you're trying to get and chase, it's going to come to you. The inner peace will come to you. The relationships that you burned will come back to you. Hopefully some of them, at least, if you put that work in and make amends. So like all these things that we're acting like it's so hard and it's the end of the world and it can't be done. And I've heard it. I've been around it. I said a lot of it. Those are just fears. Like we talked about, those are just fears and insecurities that if you just make some small, subtle changes, and I talk about this in the recovery chapter in my book, of the whole goal of this is not to tear down the policing profession. At least that's my belief. Mm-hmm. In the recovery space, we say the same thing. Some people could be really, really in a bad place where you got to tear that whole thing down and start over. Some people, which I put myself in this boat, had a foundation to me, and I had to tear down 20, 30 floors. But I didn't have to tear it all the way down. And I was able to kind of build back up based on the strong roots I already had. Really powerful stuff, I think, for police organizations to understand. We don't have to tear everything down. And if we focus on the most important job, the most important position is the chief of police, the chief executive. and we get that higher right, everything else takes care of itself. It really does. Doesn't mean there won't be conflict, doesn't mean there won't be issues, but strong, empathetic leaders finds ways to just to create momentum and work through that stuff. And at the end of the day, you're like, no, that really wasn't that hard to do. It wasn't. It just took some focus, a little collaboration, and most importantly, humility.
I have something I've picked up on in all the work with first responders and law enforcement, which is that the departments that embrace the family as well and integrate the family, and I don't mean that they have to be involved every single week, right? Because some spouses and some children are not looking for that, and neither are some of the officers. But in my view, when departments involve the family and embrace them in some fashion, I think that goes a long way. And those seem to me, as an outsider looking in, to be happier departments. What do you think of that?
100%. It's funny you asked this, and people are going to think you planned this. We planned this, but we didn't, because I was just talking about this with my wife.
We definitely didn't.
We didn't. I was talking about this with my wife, Kristen, last night, because we're working through, she's still working through she has her own experiences of me leaving the police department, and that, and that she's still working through on her own. And I was listening to her last night share these, and I'm thinking, man, we didn't talk about this. Has been 4 years or 3.5 years, and we haven't talked about what you're going through, what you're working through. And that was one of the things we talked about. It was the lack of family, the lack of the family shit. Her argument, I agree with her. Family, I think, goes through more than the individual officer goes through, because the officer knows at some point they're sitting in their car playing Tetris on their phone, or they're eating a slice of pizza. They're also doing really hard things or dangerous things, but they also know when they're not doing those things. To family members, we just think that they're doing it all day, all night. They're running around, and every moment could be something dangerous.
Yeah.
So leaders have great responsibility and would do great care to bring families into the fold, to, really focus on explaining how important it is for me to lead your family member for you, and make sure they're home for you, to have holidays as much as they can be. And that's important part of our family ethos, our organizational ethos here. I think that's really, really important. I think that's a good suggestion, Bonnie, is we need to push that more, bring the families into it.
Well, and I think that one of the things I hear from spouses too, and the clinical work, is that they're even more fearful, not just of the job, but they're more fearful knowing that their spouse is going to a place where they feel all the things that you've just described. So imagine you don't know if they're coming home, but you also don't feel supported in that fear. So I think a lot of spouses, especially of law enforcement, feel isolated and alone with those feelings, because what is the venue for them?
Right. And if you have an unhealthy marriage, or your relationship is on the rocks because of some of the stuff that your loved one is going through, yeah, where do you go? That isolation that can be a scary place. That can be a scary thing.
Yeah. And talk about resentment, the resentment you were talking about in the first responders themselves. I think a lot of significant others of first responders resent the work that we do. It's this thing that just takes us. It takes over our being, who we are, where we go, who we talk to.
And if we bring home some of that toxic energy that we pick up at work, then they're also being subjected to that, which they didn't sign up for. So, so many dynamics at play, and the family is, thankfully we're seeing more and more focus on the family as we realize, they're an integral piece of this whole community that we are as first responders. As the successful organization really depends on that family to be a support mechanism and an active participant.
Yeah, in the military we had it was the MWR, Morale, Welfare, Recreation, I believe it was called, and each company had spouses assigned as like the liaison, and they were kind of like the soccer moms of the unit. But every unit had it, whether they were active or not. I'm not sure, because I was a single guy at that time, so I wasn't involved. But the soldiers that were married, I would see them go on events and do things with their families and the other families. So there was effort at least being made. Policing, we just we don't do that. And I understand it's a different mentality, it's a different setup. We're not in the military and those structures, but definitely these conversations, I think there's more we could do. One of the things that Bonnie made me think about this is I made a post on LinkedIn about a year ago, and it was a lot of my posts are things that I'm kind of feeling in the moment. I don't plan a lot of stuff out, and I wait to kind of be inspired by something and to kind of unlock something in my brain, and I go. And so I was talking with somebody about childhood trauma, and I made this post, and they weren't even in law enforcement or first responder. So I made this post about, and I correlated her experiences to man, it made me start to think about, because I don't have a clinical background, it made me start to think about all the cops or soldiers I know in my life that had a lot of stuff they were working on. I'm thinking, man, like, or a lot of the professional baggage they had to deal with was they shot themselves in the foot, so to speak, with their personal baggage. I just started really thinking about that. So I make this post, and I had 3 or 4 daughters of, which is I found so interesting, 3 or 4 daughters of police officers who I wasn't connected with on LinkedIn reached out to me and started sharing their shame. I'm proud of my dad, but your post made me realize what an absolute a-hole he was, and screw him for taking that out on me, and everyone's celebrating him in the community. And I thought he was an a-hole. And that gray area, that juxtaposition, that was about a year ago. And that kind of what springboarded me further into this exploration with the book of like, is that the reason we're not building good cultures? Is that the reason we're not leading good? Could we go back further in our lives? Isn't that just you have a personal agenda to get promoted? You don't want to get promoted. That's why you do the things you do. Or is it much deeper than that? And then I realized I think it's much, much deeper.
Well, the reality is it's all of these factors intersecting into one point, which is, I think, what we're seeing in all the clashing that's going on.
All right.
But one thing people could do today or tomorrow is wake up and make a different choice, right? So even if you're a police officer, a paramedic, firefighter, animal control, whoever, you wake up tomorrow and you ask yourself, I'm in a toxic environment. However, do I want my family to live toxicity as well? And every day people have a choice. They have a choice to address that and look at what they're taking home and what they're doing to their spouse and their children or their elderly parents or whoever they have. And they have a choice to do something about it. So whether that's a job change, a career change, going to a therapist, I do want to acknowledge that individual personal decision-making that we all have to do as well. And for some people, I think you've seen it, David's seen it, for some people, they need to walk away and do something else. And for some people, they just need to do some trauma work and they can shift their mindset, go back to that job, go back to that family, and things can be a lot better.
Yeah, such a good point. And imagine if we can create those cultures in policing where we create places for them to heal, for them to fall down. We acknowledge it's probably going to happen. Right. We're doing a job that I acknowledge, like NFL teams acknowledge. We have these robust medical teams because we know someone's going to blow out a knee. We know someone's going to have a concussion. We know that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We need to start saying that in law enforcement. We know we're going to have team members here that are going to fall down. Personal stuff, professional stuff. We work in a job that's so intertwined, overlaps so much. We see such bad things. We're broken souls, our stuff. We just need to acknowledge it. So therefore, let's create cultures that allow for that to happen and allow for them to heal and pick themselves back up. We'll get lines out the door of cadets and people that want to work here. I have no doubt about that. I think the desire to serve communities has never been higher. I really believe that. Because a lot of this stems from our personal pain. Our childhood experiences drive us to, hey, I've been through some painful stuff. I want to serve people. So I think that line is long. I just think people are smart enough and aware enough to know, like, I am not going there. I'm not doing that. I hear too many bad things. Who would want to do that? So promote some positive stuff. Start to talk about policing and the nobility of it. Institute these amazing empathetic servant leaders these over the next 5 years. And these numbers will come flooding back. And policing, that nobility, that pride that comes with people. I remember when I got hired, I couldn't wait to tell people I was a cop. That was 2008. And I was never ashamed to say I was a cop, but it did change. I felt it change a little bit, just in myself. Yeah. I wouldn't lead on my chest on that badge as much. I would kind of like, you're coming up from my right, I might turn this way a little bit. And it started to be subconscious. And I was like, whoa, that was these are changes. That was over 13 years. This isn't 50-year change that I felt. So to ignore any of that, I think would be foolish. And I don't think we are. I think people are having these conversations. So let's keep going and talking about it. Because that change it's on the horizon. It's here. It's happening. And we can work together and everybody can benefit from it that wants to benefit from it.
Well, Chad, it's exciting. This book, it's coming out probably shortly after this is being recorded. What's the release date going to be? Where can people find the book and find you out there?
Thanks, David. 9/15. So next Friday it comes out, September 15th. Next week's going to be interesting. 9/11's on Monday. I talk about 9/11 in the book, a really deciding factor for so many of us that in this lifetime, and no different for me. I talk about my perspective on it, and so that all next week is going to be kind of centered around that. And then the book comes out 9/15. So you can get it selling on my website. the reason I'm trying to drive traffic to the website is I have some stuff that I want to do in the packages. So if you go on the website, which is motivate-change.com, my kids have been doing some things that they want to put in the packages. So we're going to really make it a personal thing to, again, kind of what you said, highlight the positivity. It's kind of a negative book, I'd say, but there's a lot of positive stuff in it too. And I want to make a community where we're not afraid to make change. And I think we're not afraid to make change when we know we're a little bit more empowering. We have positive people around us. So motivate-change.com. And of course, next Friday it'll also be on Amazon. So you can go on Amazon and buy it on Amazon.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure this book is going to be a springboard for many more conversations and you getting out there and sharing your wisdom and your depth of knowledge about this important area. So Chad, thank you for writing the book, for sharing it with us today, and I wish you continued success.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. Really appreciate it, David and Bonnie. Thank you.
Thanks for being back. We'll have you again. You know that.
Oh, definitely. Let's do it. Can't wait.
Be sure to like and subscribe. We're on YouTube, Responder Resilience, Facebook, Responder Wellness Inc., and Responder TV, bbsradio.com, all the podcast platforms, and visit our website, respondertv.com. Till the next time, stay safe, be kind to yourself. Take care.